Everybody, we're starting!
All right, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for coming today to our student-led forum for the upcoming school board elections. Originally, high school students and service leadership and student council had joined together and proposed a forum at the high school so that our students could have a chance to participate in local civics in a great hands-on learning experience. This effort was supported by our teachers and building administration, but our district administration informed us that they would only sponsor a single forum, which was on October 9th at Columbine Elementary School. Nonetheless, some high schoolers, such as myself, Mark, Allie, who is not here, and Natalie, wanted to push forward with an independent forum so that student voices could still be heard. We are grateful to welcome Mr. Bryant, Mr. Knott, and Ms. Barkley today. Thank you for supporting us in this effort. The incumbent board members have declined our invitation. We want to be honest that without district support, putting this together was really challenging. It was challenging to organize, to get the word out, to rally student interest, and to solicit questions without school time, resources, or teacher support. We did our best and have learned from the experience and appreciate everyone that's here and willing to give this a chance. The format of the forum will be as follows. Each candidate will be allotted 2 minutes for an opening statement. In that opening statement, we ask that you incorporate an answer to a student's question of, why do you want this job? Then, that will be given to all of you. You have 2 minutes to answer those questions. After that, each candidate will randomly be asked one of 12 questions and once again be given 2 minutes to respond. Finally, each candidate will be provided 2 minutes for their closing statement. Please note that all the questions were submitted by students, so even if they're not here, that their voices could be heard. So for opening statements, we'll begin with Mr. Knott.
All right. My name's Mike Knott. I have been in Woodland Park for 22 years. I have an older daughter who went to CSCS for a number of years, then Columbine in the middle school years ago until she went to Monument for high school. So I'm familiar with the schools from over a decade ago now. I currently have a 6-year-old sitting right over there who's in Columbine in first grade. I did. That's all right. I've been embarrassed plenty over the last couple of months. She's the reason that I'm running. When the incumbent board was voted in, it's easy not to pay a whole lot of attention to the school board and what's going on. And then I started seeing and hearing about policy changes that I just simply didn't agree with. Getting rid of the mental health support services, the financial decisions, the teacher gag order, teacher exodus, student exodus from the district. Those really brought it home to me that we needed some other voices to run for this. My goal in this is take the national political talking points out of the conversation with our school district. We know what we need. We know who we need to listen to, and it's not that. And so I think that needs to be the focus, and that's why I'm here.
As the name tag says, my name is Barkley. I have been in Woodland Park just about 10 years now. My husband and I moved here right after we got married. We have 3 children here, and Woodland Park is where we chose to start our family and raise our children. We just absolutely fell in love with it the first time we came up here, and the thought of moving really just isn't in a realm of possibility for us. So with all 3 of my children in the traditional public schools, seeing what the current school board is doing, the decisions they're making, the policies they're pushing through, they're claiming that they care about parent choice and parent rights, but I'm a parent and they haven't listened to me once. I went to school board meetings, I spoke at some of them, I saw other parents speaking at them, and I just saw them being ignored. And so with my professional background in human resources, in working with people, in making sure that you're balancing the needs of everybody and the needs of the corporation or the group that you're supposed to be leading. I felt that I had skills that are needed here now, that we need people on the school board who are willing to talk with those that they don't agree with without belittling them, without making fun of them or telling them that their voice doesn't matter. So that's why I've decided to run. I want to make sure that my children have a school worth going to. I don't want to have to move. I don't want to have to drive down the pass to bring them to a school that meets their needs. And I'm a firm believer in when you see a problem, try and find a solution to it. So I'm not the person to run away or just sit there and complain. I got up and I'm trying to do something about it. So that's why I'm here and that's why I'm here.
Mr. Bryant?
We can introduce on that, correct? My name is Seth Bryant. I'm kind of a new kid in Woodland Park as far as this group is concerned. I've been here with my family for 2.5 years. I grew up south of Denver in Parker, and then I lived in Omaha for about 20 years, where I started my family. And when I was given the opportunity to put them anywhere I wanted, we chose here. I think most people sitting in this room would understand why, just looking out the window and looking around, seeing these faces. But much like Keegan, this is my forever home. So that being the case, I jumped right in. I've always been a really involved parent. I love volunteering in the classroom with my kids, going on field trips, helping out with different activities like junior achievement or after school things. And I just saw this school system change from the one that we moved to this community for to a district that wasn't really representative of the community we fell in love with. I saw opportunities to try and get involved and contribute a voice and, promote some dialogue. I was on the school accountability committee for the middle school, and I was the chairman of the district accountability committee for the last year. And I had a lot of opportunity to meet a ton of different stakeholders in this community. Parents from our neighborhood schools, business owners, people from our charter schools, and just members of the community who would come and attend our meetings that they found interesting. And it really did reaffirm my belief that this community has a much broader vision for their schools than what's going on right now. What I see is a very narrow political agenda driving all the decision making at this board. It's not stakeholder input. It is not necessarily the best interest of students and families in this district. It is an agenda that's quite frankly coming from outside of Teller County. This is not our community, and I think that it's critical we open up that dialogue again to make sure that the education we are providing our kids is truly reflective of this community, that it's focused on giving them the best outcomes possible, and that we are making decisions in a public forum. There has been a lot of leadership by surprise, is what I'd coin it, and I just don't believe in that on a fundamental level. I think that good leadership involves stakeholders from the beginning. Okay, finished, thank you.
Thank you. We're now going to ask questions that each one of you will have a chance to answer. So we'll start with Ms. Barkley, and the first question is, what is your highest priority if elected?
Yeah, wow, that's a great question. So there's a lot of things I'd like to change, but I think probably the highest priority is making sure that our students have the resources that they need, so both in teacher support as well as bringing back some of the mental health support that was there. I think right now, not only do we have our teacher shortage that is detrimental to the education of all of these students, but also the burden that's been placed on them to kind of play both of those roles of educator and supporter is more than you can really expect one person to do. So for my highest priority, I believe, would be making sure we have enough educators first off to cover all the classes so that we don't have classes with 30+ students in them, but then also to make sure we have those additional supports so that our educators can focus on educating, and people who have training in supporting mental health issues can
Mr. Bryant, what would your highest priority be if elected?
One of the things I think the district is lacking right now, and is a big problem for the culture of the district, is a cohesive vision. So my highest priority would be developing a strategic plan for the district. Where do we want to go as a community? What does successful education look like here in Woodland Park School District? What do we expect out of our graduates? And then we start building our education around that program, to support those goals. I think having that long-term cohesive vision is going to get rid of a lot of the uncertainty. It's going to help people understand the drivers behind decision making. And it's really going to be a moment we can pivot and realign and come together
Seth,
here.
could you speak up just a little bit more, please?
I will do my best.
Thank you.
So I think it's an opportunity for us to all come together and pivot into a common shared direction. That doesn't mean we have to agree on every single little aspect. It doesn't mean we'll have to adjust as we go further in the plan and have to adjust to reality of situations. But having that shared goal, that shared vision, is really going to help, I think, reunite this school district and this community around educating our kids.
And Mr. Knott, what is your highest priority?
I think mine is opening communication for some very specific purposes. What I see is schools that are in crisis right now throughout the district, for the most part, the traditional public schools, through no fault of the administration or the teachers that are there. And I think we need to find out, I think a very immediate short-term goal for me would be empowering the principals to come to us with what do you need in the short term to make things work moving forward. Because again, I see my daughter's class size doubled from kindergarten to first grade. There's 30 kids in there. She doesn't have a full-time para to help her out. I want to hear how many of those stories exist in the schools and figure out what we can do with them in the short term. I think that's a critical piece. I think we need to reach out to teachers who have left the district over the last year and find out specifically why. I think we need to have the same conversation with families that have left the district to find out why, so that we can prioritize what we need to address in the immediate to keep things moving and keep things moving forward, and to express to the teachers and the families that make up this district that we are listening and that we care and we want you here, we don't want you leaving, and we want to keep the traditional public schools healthy.
So our next question is that as a community and as students, we hear a lot about parents' rights, but can you speak to us about your feelings around students' rights? And we'll have Mr. Bryant go first.
So I view education as a partnership. The student is the beneficiary of that education, and it is a partnership that it also involves the teacher with the parent being the authority on what actually happens. So I think the student needs to be an active participant in their education. As far as rights of a student, those are generally pretty legally clearly defined. And I'm not a lawyer. I would want to make sure that any decision we were making protected the rights of parents, protected the rights of students, and it respected everybody else's constitutional rights. I can't necessarily say without an example how I might feel on a specific topic, but I do think, especially high school students, you're becoming young adults, and for me as a parent, that means I have to make my student, my child, more responsible in the decisions that are being made around their education. So I, as a parent, would be bringing my kid in, giving them a little more sovereignty over the decisions they can make, unless I thought it was, a path of woe and wrong, that type of thing, where a parent was obliged to step in. But really, that's a family by family case. So unless there was a specific policy thing happening, we consult legal experts to make sure everybody's rights were being protected. But for me, the rights of a student are subordinate to their governmental information.
We'll go with Mr. Knott.
Okay. You know, I echo much of what Seth said. I think there's always a balance when you talk about these things. It's a very different conversation with a 10-year-old than it is with a 17-year-old. Obviously, on how much they can choose and how much agency they should have in those choices. That said, I think, again, this goes back to a communication issue. I think it's very easy to get caught up in sort of quicksand when the students aren't sure what's happening, the parents aren't sure what's happening, and the schools maybe not sure what's happening, and things are changing for the teachers constantly. So I think you've got to open those things up, and I think you've got to open the communication. I mean, for example, if you're talking about a controversial book, you know, I think students have a right to be exposed to controversial subjects. I think that's a necessary part of education. You should consider things that make you uncomfortable and that you don't understand, or else I'm not sure how you really learn new subject matter. And so I think you've got to, the school as the partner that Seth talked about has to play a role in that certainly, and I think that comes in making sure that all the parties involved in that are aware that there may be a controversial book in a class and are aware that this is an elective or it's a required class, and that information is shared. Now, the partnership part for me comes in also is that parents have a responsibility to be involved in their child's education, and they should be reading over what those reading lists are in an ideal world, and they should be having those conversations with the students, and then you decide. And I think an important aspect of this is just because something's controversial and it's offered doesn't mean it's bad and doesn't mean it's good for every kid in the district. A lot of families have different values, and that's perfectly fine. I think the key part is making sure families know that there is an opt-out option for nearly everything that's controversial that's ever been taught or discussed in Woodland Park School District, and that's something that's been completely lost in the current conversation. So if the student isn't comfortable, they have the option to opt out. If the parents aren't comfortable, they have the option to opt out. So things aren't being forced down anybody's throat. And so, you know, I think that's critical, and I think really, again, just to close, it comes down to a balance. It truly does. So. We said it all, it's hard to that third.
So, yes to almost all of that. I think a lot of times, you know, you just kind of have to look at, again, it's a situation by situation basis. So, you know, what would a situation be where the student feels like their rights are not being listened to, right? Is it because the school isn't listening, or is it a disagreement between the student and the parent, right? So if it's the school is not listening, then of course as a school board member, it would be my responsibility to figure out what the disconnect is, right? So to have a conversation with the students, figure out where they feel their rights are being oppressed, and what we can do to make sure that they feel comfortable in their education and that all their needs are being met. If it's a parent-teacher or parent-student conflict, you know, then in that situation, I don't feel it would necessarily be my responsibility or my, really in my realm of right to get in the middle of that conversation. Again, if we have some mental health resources or people in the schools that are able to kind of mediate that type of conversation, if that's a thing that needs to happen, then I think the school could provide those services so that the students and the parents can come together and have the conversation that they need to have to make sure that they're moving in a direction together. But it wouldn't necessarily be my place to step in and choose the parent's right or student's right over the other. I think it's again, making sure we're having those hard conversations so that everyone's on the same page and we can all feel good in the direction we're going.
And the other repetitive repetitive theme that we've found in student questions is, how do you guys plan to support student involvement with the board and to hear student voice on issues that could affect us? So we will start with Ms. Barkley.
Yeah. So, echoing what I was just saying, I think a huge part is making sure that those lines of communication are open, right? So there should be a way for you as a student to get your questions or your concerns or your comments directly to those making the decisions. I think, you know, we do have SAC committee and we have DAC, and I think the students' involvement in those committees would be important. Again, age appropriately, obviously we don't need kindergartners on the SAC meetings. But not that they don't have opinions, I can tell you what kindergarten but not necessarily always the most helpful. But I think that as long as we've got those lines of communication, right, that's the huge missing piece right now. You're having this forum today because you did not feel that your concerns were being addressed in the traditional, I'll put in quotes, adult forums. And so you took a step to make sure that your voices were being heard. And I think as long as we're having those communication lines open, you can ask questions without feeling like there's going to be repercussions, then your voices will be heard.
Mr. Bryant?
I've got a couple of things that I think would be really helpful for keeping student voices involved and heard. One is expanding representation on the District Accountability Committee. I would like to see a high school, or I guess they call it School of Rhetoric, student from merit on the board. I think it's important that those young adults have a voice, along with expanding the high school, Woodland Park High School representation to include someone from their student government. I think it's important to foster civic involvement at that level. So I think as a board member, I personally would make myself available to the student government, maybe in a regular cadence. You know, if there's some sort of back and forth report we can do. And I think really that kind of idea can expand to a lot of areas in this community, but certainly be an avenue for students to, you know, have their voices heard. And I think just changing the tone and approachability. I don't know if anybody ever saw on Facebook, but earlier this year we hosted coffees, or we were available to meet, you know, at coffee at the Coffee Cottage or at Tony's or something like that. And a couple of times we had students show up and ask questions. And I think just being available and hearing them out as individuals is important. I can't always say that I'm going to make the decisions that a student would want me to, but I will always try to make the decisions that I believe are in, you know, a student's best interest.
Yeah, I think another couple areas to piggyback on what Keegan and Seth said is, you know, I think the public comment in the board meetings should not be limited to 30 minutes. I think we should be there as late as we need to be there into the evening. That's what we signed up for, and that's what needs to happen. And that will certainly include student chances to get up and speak as community members. So I think that's one that can easily be implemented. You know, I would like to see the board in general, the school board, you know, re-establish relationships with the city council and the county commissioners and, you know, principals at the different schools. And I would include the students in that. So if the student government or the group of students wanted to, you know, it'd be easy to host a, you know, monthly kind of open meeting with students where you could have as many board members as were available there to come in and ask questions and learn about the process and feel like we were listening to you, because that would certainly be one of the goals. So I think there are some very concrete, pretty easy to establish changes that we could make that would change the whole town. So.
Oh. Yeah. We liked it so much. So we're not going to ask individual questions that were all submitted by students to each of you individually. Those will be read by Allie and Mark, and again, you'll have 2 minutes to respond to each of them. So we'll just go down the line, starting with Mr. Knott and
Sure.
Oh. Natalie. All right. Mike.
Okay, Mike, what would you intend to do in regards to the American birthright social studies standards? If you removed, if you removed them, what would be the plan moving forward?
I would be in favor of removing the American birthright standards from the traditional public schools. I can't see moving forward with a set of standards that were rejected by the state, that whatever emails have come out are not currently, our classes that incorporate American birthright standards are not currently accepted by the NCAA. The Civics Alliance that created the American birthright standards recommends flat out getting rid of AP classes. And so, no, I'm not in favor of keeping those standards. That said, there's teachers in this room. I also don't think it's productive to walk in day one and say the American birthright standards are out and all the work you've done on them are gone in a minute, because that puts the students and the teachers in a pretty impossible situation. So I think that's when you get to the strategic plan that Seth talked about. I think we need to, as a community, by talking to stakeholders, we need to figure out what do we want our standards to accomplish. And then I think we need to move forward from there as far as making some decisions on what we're going to do in the short term. But I don't think the American birthright standards are it for me.
All right, this is to Ms. Barkley. How do you intend to keep politics and political ideologies from entering and affecting our schools?
No, so I think honestly it's impossible to keep it out completely, right? People come into conversations with their political ideologies with them, right? They make decisions based off of them. But I think as long as what we're doing is focusing on the needs of Woodland Park, focusing on the needs of the students in these buildings, in this neighborhood, then the rest of it can kind of be in the background, right? So you have, it may be what's driving some of your values, or you may choose political decisions based on what your values are, and those values are going to come into the schools, and they're vital, really, to making sure that we are creating an environment that works for everybody in this community. But I think what is most important is making sure that we're focusing on local issues, local needs, local problems, and solving them locally, as opposed to listening to what's happening in the rest of the country when looking at our school district. And as long as we're making decisions that are focused on what your needs are, what our needs are, then the rest of the political stuff can be outside of that. Yeah.
Mr. Bryant, what are your thoughts as far as security moving forward, especially regarding the armed personnel in district buildings?
I am absolutely for making sure our schools are hardened, and it would be difficult for someone with bad intentions to get in and do anything. I'm really curious as to what the qualifications of our district personnel are. They've only been told broad terms, and when I've read news reports that have talked about other districts, our district is the sole district that does not disclose that. I'm also very concerned that I don't see them in buildings as regularly as I would like to. I'm in the middle school pretty regularly. I see people drive around, and I see people in the district administration building next to the high school often, but it's not what I saw when we had school resource officers. I was a big fan of the school resource officer program. Law enforcement has very standard credentials for being able to assume that position. They go through regular training and drilling and proficiency tests, and I think it was a really important relationship that happened in the community. I don't know if anybody knows Officer Darren, who was the old middle school SRO, but I don't know a kid in that building who would want to walk up and high-five him, hug him, something like that. He built relationships there, and what that did was build trust for every single other police officer that went in that building. I don't know if anybody notices, but kind of part of the national narrative is that in a lot of places, police aren't too popular. And that's something I see very different in our community. We love our police officers, and I think part of that is because they're deeply embedded in our communities, and a big part of that was the school resource officer program. I liked seeing them there. I felt, or I feel at least now, anecdotally from my observations, it was more regular security than what's happening now. Additionally, I think there are some building hardening things that I won't discuss here publicly that could happen and need to happen. I have talked to the board about those. And I've talked to Chief Deisler, and he's got some recommendations for the district that are, some of them are very low-hanging fruit that would be easy for us to implement and improve our security posture. So it's critical to me. I think there are lots of avenues that we can approach school security in. I do think it is appropriate in this day and age to have armed people in schools protecting our students. I would love for society to change and that not be a thing anymore. But right now, that's unfortunately a real consideration. So students who don't feel safe aren't ready to learn, and so it's obviously a priority.
Mr. Knott, as a school board member, what would be your plan regarding the Summit platform in our schools?
Honestly, yeah, that's my big one. I think you talk to folks about the Summit Learning Platform, and it's all over the map. I mean, some families love it, and their kid thrives, and other families hate it, and their kid hasn't thrived. And so it's a tough one. What I think we need to do is I would incorporate that absolutely in the 5-year strategic plan we'd like to implement. Because there's a lot of factors that go into that. The incumbent board ran on getting rid of the Summit platform, and they were unable to do it. It's not as easy as it seems to just throw it out the window. I haven't served on the board yet, but I know that. There's financial costs involved. There's training costs involved. There's materials costs theoretically involved. There's a lot of things that go into those decisions of the learning platform. What I can say is I haven't had a lot of experience firsthand with the Summit Learning Platform, so I'm open to conversations either way about it. It turns out that this district has moved. I've had a couple of teachers tell me that they believe this district has moved past the Summit Learning Platform being an effective choice for us. I have no dog in that fight at this point, and I'm open to those conversations as far as researching and finding an alternative. So, and I think, again, part of what we have to sift out right now after the last 5 months and the last 2 years and, all this division and anger and all that is, we have to get that stuff all pulled out and start talking about what actually needs to happen from a policy standpoint in the schools. And Summit would be very high up on my list of things for me, but I can't give you a hard answer right now because I think there's too many conversations that need to happen and too much evaluation of finances and other things before I can make a decision on it.
Ms. Barkley, how do you plan to expand student opportunities, including AP classes, concurrent enrollment classes, vocational classes, and programs like Career Start at the high school?
Yeah, so I think that goes back to, coincidentally, that my top priority was bringing in more personnel. So currently we don't have enough personnel to meet the AP needs that we have specifically in the high school. And so making sure we have the teachers who have the level of education that's required to teach those AP courses would be number one, right? We need to make sure that we are providing our students with as many opportunities as we possibly can to make sure that those that want to take those classes have the opportunity to do so, so that they're able to proceed with their college careers. And of course, college is not the path for everybody, nor do I think it should be necessarily. And so actually we've been speaking with some people in the community, business owners. I actually have a meeting later on today about just that thing, to see what we can do in the future to make sure that our local organizations, our local companies that want to participate in internship programs or apprenticeships and that kind of things are available to our students as well. So that they can get a leg up and maybe take those classes, instead of taking additional math classes once they've reached, the level that they are required to do so. If they want to be an electrician or a plumber, we've got companies in the community that we're willing to set up internship programs, and we need to make sure that those relationships are set so that those abilities are there for our students. But yes, I think it's, making sure that we're making the connections, making those relationships, again, opening up those lines of communication so that it's easy for anyone in the community who wants to be able to participate in that to do so. And then making sure we're bringing in the personnel in the building so that the student opportunities are there, so we don't have, AP classes that are packed to the brim. We don't have to force students to take classes online because we don't have the personnel in the building to do so. And then,
Mr. Bryant, how do you plan on addressing the lack of mental health and support staff in our schools, as well as the lack of funding for such services?
Well, the first is, problem with the second. We have to go seek funding again if we want to go out these programs. We spent, as a district, 10 years developing a mental health program. Thank you very much for the prompt. I appreciate that. We spent 10 years as a district developing mental health programs here, applying for grants, putting personnel and social workers in the schools, building crisis response teams so we could immediately address students who were struggling or going through a serious event in their life. And the majority of that is gone right now. It's been outsourced to a private organization down in the Springs. And instead of it being funded at no cost to the community through these grants and different programs, we're now billing insurance and Medicare for this, which is a different approach, but I think it makes it less accessible at the end. So for me, accessibility is a big issue. In order to make it accessible, we have to make it available. To make it available, we have to seek funding for that. So that would be one of our first directives, or at least the directive I would propose is to instruct the superintendent to reapply for any grants that we would still be eligible for, and to seek out additional grants to make up that space and augment the things we've lost. This is a really, really important thing. Teller County is a hot spot for youth suicide. In the past 6 years, we didn't have any kids harm themselves that way. And I think that largely goes to the successful interventions that we've done. There were still 60 interventions last year with students who were having thoughts about self-harm. It's not that this problem has gone away from this community, it's that we are successfully addressing it. And I think it's reckless that we transitioned away from that kind of track record without something that would really support it being better. So I would look to replicate that success that we previously had around that program. I think, again, if students aren't feeling safe, if they're in crisis, they are not ready to learn. So it may not be the sole prerogative of a school district to address student mental health, but it is definitely a critical component to students being ready to learn, and potentially one of the best places to identify and intervene with students in crisis. During the school year, my student... Okay.
Mr. Knott, currently at WPHS, there are classes with close to 35 kids, making for overcrowded classrooms. How would you help to prevent these large classes?
Well, I think it's bringing back good teachers that want to teach in Woodland Park High School. There's so many conversations about, everything's better than ever, and yet I walk into the schools and I talk to the families and I talk to the students and I talk to the teachers, and that is just simply not what anybody has said to me in 5 months. I don't think things are better than ever, and I think, what we've got to do is, we're making the national news for all the wrong reasons, and that's got to stop. And I think that starts a conversation of bringing the best teachers back. I mean, all the correlations between student success are good teachers and parental involvement. Those are the two factors that determine more than anything else. So we've got to keep the good teachers that we have and bring more high quality teachers in. And I think that's looking at teacher salaries, so we've got to look at the budget, we've got to prioritize that as an issue. I think we've got to change the dynamic and the communication with the entire nation, because we're known for all the wrong things right now nationally. I think we need to, again, reach out to those teachers that have left the district and have conversations with them about what was it, why was it. With no question whatsoever in my mind, the gag order goes away day one. Never seen anything like that. I've been managing people in businesses for over 20 years, and if you have to put a gag order on your staff, you're doing it wrong. I'm sorry. And that should never have to be put in place. I think it's things like that that show teachers that you actually are valued. We shouldn't have to be blasting stickers and everything over social media saying teachers aren't the enemy. Of course teachers aren't the enemy. Teachers are our community. We need to support them, and we need to give them the resources that they need to succeed. These are people that have our children 7 hours a day for 9 months of the year. How about we support them instead of rip them apart? I think that alone changes the whole dynamic up here. For years, we have teachers up here who are getting less pay to be part of this community, and they have made that choice, and it's a balanced decision they have made. You have to make it worthwhile. You cannot expect teachers to come up and work in a situation where they're under attack every minute of every day. So we've got to change that, and I think then we will start to see some positive returns pretty quickly.
Barkley, what are your feelings about the separation of church and state?
You get all the good ones. Wow. You get all the good ones, Keegan.
No, again, so much like the politics, right? You're not going to separate religion or church from the people, and the people are in the schools. But I think, again, as long as we're making decisions and policies and choosing curriculum that are for bettering all of our students, regardless of what church they go to outside of the building, then you're not going in the right direction. So of course everyone is going to bring in their own personal beliefs into the building with them. That's with them always. But we need to make sure we're making policy decisions that are to the betterment of everybody and not just a particular group.
Mr. Bryant, how do you plan to support programs like Envirothon, Knowledge Bowl, Marching Band, Welding, and many other activities and arts programs that receive little to no funding or recognition from the district?
I don't know what Envirobowl is. Obviously bringing awareness would help that. I do see a lot of those other groups though represented. Our welding team I've seen get a lot more publicity. I think there's an opportunity to help augment their program too by partnering with local industry. We've got a number of tradesmen in the area, things like that. Welding is a skill that's used across a number of trades, from fabrication to being a mechanic to all sorts of things. So I'd seek out partnerships like that. As a board member, I think we've got a certain amount of visibility. So being at those types of events, using our platform to amplify that, I think can bring more community and student attention to those things. I think Knowledge Bowl is great. I was not aware we had a program here, but I do like seeing those types of things. Really, as a board member, I think I've got two opportunities. One is by listening to the community about how they want those types of extracurriculars financed and supported, because there are tiers of priority, right? We have to make sure that we've got teachers in the classrooms before we can make sure we've got a knowledge goal. That would be pretty tough to justify otherwise. And then, so making sure that we're listening to see, how we want to support those programs and making choices to reflect that. And then using our visibility as board members to support those programs, talk about it at board meetings, attend events that we're able to, that type of thing. I'm very eager to use that app on the platform to bring attention to all of the things. So, there you go.
Mr. Knott, what do you plan to do regarding space at the middle school between Merritt, the middle schoolers, and will there be any reconsideration of the sixth graders being moved back to the elementary schools?
Here's my turn. I think the first thing you have to do is look at the sort of contractual obligations that are going on between Merritt and the district. Well, Merritt's part of the district, but between Merritt and the traditional public schools. I think you need to look at that. I think you need to look at, my understanding from the current facilities use agreement is basically as Merritt expands, it will be given additional space in the middle school. My question has always been from the beginning, what happens with the sixth graders? What happens with the seventh and eighth graders? Is there a plan? What does it look like? How much is it going to cost? How long is it going to take to implement? And those are things that I just don't know right now. So I don't know how to give you a hard and fast answer other than I think everything should be on the table for that. I think the reality is, in the end, it could make sense to put the seventh and eighth graders back in the high school, which is where they were years ago. It could make sense to do something different with the middle school. It could make sense to build a new building. I don't know, because I think we have a lot of feasibility studies that would need to be done with that. I also think we would need to have some clear projections on enrollment numbers that are tough to come by right now. So I think there's a lot of factors like that that have to be worked into that. But again, I think that the motivating factor needs to be what is in the best interest of all 6 schools in the district. And so that has to play a huge role in it, is to balance those things. We're not a district that's created to just make sure the high school succeeds or just make sure that Merritt succeeds. We need to be making sure that all 6 schools are thriving and that's got to be the goal. So, I think you let the data drive that decision, and then you figure out how to implement it at the lowest cost. And I think a lot of work needs to be done before we can start making informed decisions about what direction things go.
Ms. Barkley, as a school board member, how do you intend to increase staff retention and attract new teachers to WPSD?
That's a good question. So actually what I do for a living is talent acquisition and talent retention in the company I work for. So the retention, it's much easier to keep the employees you have than it is to bring in new ones. So for me, first, it's making sure that the employees that you already have are in an environment where they feel appreciated, and where they have the resources they need to succeed at their job. So a lot of what I do in my day-to-day is coming up with, creating surveys. So we do like pulse surveys throughout the year to make sure that, what are we missing, right? Where are those needs that we're not addressing yet? Maybe the things we just didn't even know of, right? And it doesn't make sense to try and solve issues. Like if you just say, okay, our issue is that employees are leaving. Well, there could be a million different reasons why, and it doesn't make sense for the management or leadership to try and guess. The best place to get that information is to go to the actual employees. So again, those lines of communication are so important. So making sure we're asking those questions. Okay, if you're not happy, why? What can we do to support you to make you able to succeed, right? What do you need from us? So that's the first piece, making sure the employees feel appreciated and that they have all the resources they need. And then the second piece is once you have a happy core, right? Once the employees that are there are happy, it's much, much easier to bring in new people because they see other people happy in their work. And those people, those teachers are gonna talk, oh, it's so wonderful to work at Woodland Park. It's great. We love the community. We love the students. We love the support we have. And that is such a huge bonus, such a huge boost in bringing in new employees. And then you can go out making sure you're crafting the job descriptions that talk about how wonderful it is to be here and the benefits they would have. And making sure that during the interview process, again, you're listening. You're not just asking questions the whole time, you're also listening to make sure that you're addressing the needs. If they have a question, make sure you're answering that so that they feel good from day one, coming into the building, coming into this environment, that they know that this is a place that they're going to enjoy working. Because people, yes, they're working for a paycheck, but there's paychecks all over the place. And if they don't enjoy where they're working, they will find somewhere else to go.
Last one from the Tupperware. Mr. Bryant, how would you intend to address issues surrounding library books and classes deemed controversial?
So I think the easiest thing for us to do is to make it all transparent. What books are in our library? What is the curriculum being taught in classes? So that parents have that information easily accessible to them and can make the right choices for their students. I look at it kind of like a restaurant menu. If you can speak about it anecdotally. I may not be a fan of avocado. So if I go to a restaurant, I'm going to skip over the guacamole. I'm not going to order some for me and my family. But I'm certainly not going to ask the restaurant to take guacamole off the menu. I think public schools are an important place for children to come together and experience the diversity of their community. And that means people, and that means ideas. It doesn't mean that we need to try and convince kids that something different is right or something different is not right. It means they just need to be aware that life exists outside of their experience and have the opportunity to explore that. And as a parent, I think it's vital that I'm the one who helps guide my child in that. That's why with my kids, we have conversations about what our family values are. When they take classes, or if I get a permission slip, like can my student check out books or the young adult books, I call up the librarian and I say, well, what does this mean? I call up Kelly Bradley at the middle school and I talk to her. Something this school district has always had was the ability for a parent to call up and say, what's my kid reading in the library? Or I don't want them to have the ability to check out young adult books. Or I want them to have my approval to check out any book. And the librarian will sit there and accommodate it every single time. I've never had that not be the case. So I think it's really easy. We've got a lot of tools that we already have. And then transparency makes it easy for parents to exercise their decision making and their authority over their students. So I want to publish curriculum and all the lesson plans and things like that we can provide prior to a school year, so a parent sees what their kid's going to be learning. And I'd like for our library's catalog to be available online. And maybe you could just reinforce that communication. Like, if you have concerns about what your kid might be exposed to in our library, set up a call with the librarian, set up a meeting with them. They are here to be that liaison for you. I will also say that I know our librarians have rubrics that they use to grade every book that they bring into their library. So there's already a fairly standardized evaluation process happening, making sure that the material that we're putting in our schools is age appropriate, is community appropriate. So that's how I deal with it, transparency and accessibility.
So thank you for taking the time to hear the students' voices today, and you now have your time for your closing statements, Mr. Knott.
All right. It's very clear to me, and it's become more clear over the last 5 months, that what is happening in our district is a very narrow definition of progress. And it's coming from a national movement that is political in nature and is trying to use us as the first guinea pig district that's gotten this far with them. I don't believe that's right for our community, and I think we need to reject it. I know I will be when I vote. I think that the outcome of that with things like the American Birthright Standards is that our kids are in effect being used as guinea pigs to try something new. It's been rejected by the state. It's not been accepted anywhere else in the nation. I think that's a problem. I look at the financial spending and what we're spending on attorney's fees over the last 2 years, and my jaw hits the floor. It's over $300,000. In 2 years, most years, we average $20,000 to $30,000 as a district. We're bleeding money. I talk to teachers, and teachers are terrified that 81 of them are willing to stand up in a public meeting and go against the board gag order and against the board, their employers, to speak up and speak out against the board. Teachers shouldn't have to be put in that position. The demonization has got to stop. We have to change all these things, and I think it's easy to look at that and think, oh, it's bad management. It's not. I think it's actually very effective management by the incumbent board. I just think their goals are not mine. I think our traditional public schools are under attack by the school board. I don't think there's any reason to mince words about that. I think they've already tried, there was already an application from yet another charter school last year to come up and take over Gateway Elementary School. What are we doing? What are we doing? I think that my goal is to serve all 6 schools in the district, and it is to rebuild the traditional public schools, because we are far beyond the point of, oh, we have some issues. We're way past that. Now we've got to save the traditional public schools, and we've got to rebuild them, because if we don't do it now, I don't believe that they will be here in their current iteration in even a couple of years. And that's where we are. So I think it's a matter of, what do we want our community to be? Do we want it to be an angry, divisive place, or do we want it to be a place with open communication where we're working on things together? It doesn't mean everybody's going to agree with us, and they don't have to, but they're going to know why we're making the decisions that we're making. They're going to know what went into making those decisions, what the factors were, and it's going to be clear, whether you like it or hate it. And that's something I can promise you if I'm elected, and I think if we don't,
You're a little over.
we don't make a change, it's really, we're going to be looking at a totally different community very quickly.
Yeah, so again, the reason I'm running is because my kids are in this school. The reason I'm running is because I love this community. The reason I'm running is because I see issues and I feel I have a way to work towards solving them. And I am running because what I see as the future of Woodland Park, if nothing changes, is not a place I want to live. It's not the place I chose to live. And this election for school board, I know, at least when I started running, I knew it was important, but over the last 6 months, just seeing everything ramp up on both sides and how angry everyone is and how unheard everyone feels. Everyone on both sides feels that no one is listening. And that is because the current board is not listening. Nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to get better if the current board stays on. The only way to stop this divisiveness, the only way to move past it and to make this positive change is to change the people who are up there making the decisions. So really that's what this election is about. It's, do you like the current state of Woodland Park? Do you like the current state of the schools? Do you like the current conversations happening on Facebook, on Nextdoor, in the newspaper? Or would you like to move past this? Can we calm the storm? Can we get to a place where we're just neighbors again? We can go to the coffee shops and we can just have conversations and help each other. Because that's the Woodland Park I moved to. And that's the Woodland Park I'm fighting for. So that's why I'm
students, my two students, and you all. I am really concerned about what kind of academic outcomes are going to be available for my kids. In the next 4 years, my student's going to go through high school. I want him to have opportunities in AP courses and dual enrollment. I would love to save a few $1,000s on sending him to college. That'd be real nice. And I want him to come out of Woodland Park School District with the ability to analyze and critically evaluate different concepts and situations he's going to run into in the real world that have been reinforced by our family's values. I do not think it is the school district's job to indoctrinate children or to teach them political agendas. I think it's the school district's job to teach the kids. That means we focus on the common set of skills and knowledge that's going to make them successful in this community. We make sure that they know how to do research, they know how to do math, they understand logic and thinking, and they come out with a sense of civic involvement and wanting to contribute to society. For me, that's what would be important for a graduate of Woodland Park. That's what I want to see my kids have. Maybe we've got some other different ideas as a community. I think it's really important we come together and talk about that and figure it out. I think opening the dialogue